A venture-backed company raised $120 million to build a juice machine. The machine was later found to be entirely unnecessary. You could skip it entirely and just squeeze the juice pack with your hands. That was not a product flaw they discovered late. That was the product. And 16 of Silicon Valley's smartest investors funded it anyway. This is the story of Juicero, a company that turned $120 million into a cautionary tale in under 2 years. And somehow nobody saw it coming. Or rather, everybody saw it coming, except the people who mattered. To understand Juicero, you have to understand the mid-2010s Silicon Valley mindset. Everything was being disrupted. Taxis, hotels, razors, mattresses. If it existed, someone was raising a Series A to do it differently. The logic was seductive. Find a large, slow-moving industry, insert software and hardware, lock in recurring revenue, call it a platform. It worked spectacularly for some companies. It made investors pattern match everything into the same template. Doug Evans founded Juicero in 2013. He was a health and wellness entrepreneur who had previously built Organic Avenue, a cold-pressed juice chain in New York. He believed deeply, perhaps cosmically, in the power of juice. Evans reportedly compared himself to Steve Jobs on more than one occasion. He described his produce supply chain as having, quote, the same complexity as launching a rocket ship. He meant this as a compliment to himself. The concept was this: Juicero would sell a countertop press for the home. Users would buy proprietary produce packs, pre-filled, sealed pouches of chopped fruits and vegetables sourced from partner farms. The machine would press the pack and deliver fresh juice in under 2 minutes. There was a Wi-Fi chip inside. The machine would scan a QR code on each pack to verify it hadn't expired. If your internet went down, the machine would not work. This was presented as a feature. The pitch to investors leaned hard on the word platform. The packs were the razor blades. The machine was the razor. Recurring subscription revenue from produce packs would compound indefinitely. Investors recognized this model immediately. They loved this model. Between 2014 and 2016, Juicero raised approximately $120 million in funding. The investors were not nobodies. Google Ventures participated. Kleiner Perkins participated. Campbell Soup made a strategic investment. These are not unsophisticated institutions. The machine itself cost an estimated $400 to manufacture. Juicero initially sold it for $699. They later dropped the price to $399 under pressure. The juice packs ran roughly $5 to $8 each. A daily juice habit ran to well over $150 a month. For context, a cold-pressed juice at a retail store runs roughly $3 to $12. You did not need a $700 machine to obtain one. This was also not a secret. It was simply not the point of the conversation anyone was having. Evans designed the machine to be beautiful. He reportedly worked with a designer who had previously worked on Apple products. The internal engineering reportedly used over 400 custom parts. The device was, by most accounts, extraordinarily well built for what it did. What it did was squeeze a bag. A very expensive, very connected, very precisely engineered machine to squeeze a bag. The board approved the manufacturing budget. Of course they did. By early 2017, Juicero had shipped machines to customers and was generating revenue. The press coverage was largely positive, framing it as an audacious bet on the future of home nutrition. Evans was profiled approvingly in major outlets. Then came April 19, 2017. Bloomberg published a story. The reporters had obtained Juicero packs and, in the interest of journalism, decided to try squeezing them by hand instead of using the machine. They squeezed out the juice in roughly the same time as the machine, sometimes faster. The story went everywhere. Immediately. It crystallized every instinctive suspicion people had harbored about Silicon Valley's obsession with solving problems that did not exist. The phrase Wi-Fi connected juicer became shorthand for an entire category of absurdity. Juicero's response was that the machine applied 4 tons of pressing force. This was true. It was also completely irrelevant, given that human hands had just achieved the same result: 4 tons of force to defeat a human hand. This was, apparently, not part of the original product testing criteria. Evans stepped down as CEO in March 2017, before the Bloomberg story, as the company had already been facing pressure. Jeff Dunn, a former Coca-Cola executive, came in to try to stabilize things. He had roughly 5 months. The Bloomberg story accelerated what was already a structural problem. Juicero had been burning through cash at a rate its subscription revenue could not sustain. Acquiring new customers was expensive. The addressable market for a $400 Wi-Fi juicer requiring proprietary packs was, it turned out, finite. The company began searching urgently for a buyer or additional investors after the story broke. Multiple acquisition conversations reportedly failed to produce a deal. No buyer materialized at a price that would have satisfied existing investors. In September 2017, Juicero announced it was shutting down operations. The company had been live, in a meaningful commercial sense, for less than 18 months. $120 million in venture capital had produced a machine that was less useful than 2 hands. Customers were offered refunds for their machines. Inventory was liquidated. The produce pack supply chain, which Evans had compared to a rocket launch, was simply discontinued. The farms that had partnered with Juicero lost a customer. The investors lost their capital. Post-mortem estimates placed the loss at somewhere between $120 million and higher, depending on how you account for operational spending. For comparison, $120 million is enough to fund dozens of early-stage companies for years. It funded one connected juice press for about 3. Evans, for his part, went on to pursue other ventures in the wellness space. He later reportedly became interested in sun gazing and raw water consumption. This information is provided without further editorial comment because none is necessary. So what actually happened here? The convenient answer is that one eccentric founder oversold a bad idea. That answer is too easy and too comfortable for the investors who handed him $120 million. The real failure was a collective one. Sophisticated investors applied a framework, platform, hardware lock-in, recurring revenue, without asking whether the underlying consumer problem was real. Nobody apparently squeezed the bag by hand during due diligence. Or if they did not raise the point loudly enough. This is the lesson Juicero actually teaches. A compelling business model narrative is not a substitute for product necessity. The razor and blades model works when the razor does something the customer cannot replicate without it. The moment your razor becomes optional, you don't have a platform. You have a very expensive accessory. When the story of the 2010 startup era is finally written with the detachment it deserves, Juicero will be in the first chapter. Not because it was the biggest failure, because it was the most honest one. It showed exactly what the era believed, stripped of every flattering disguise. A machine that did less than your hands, funded by some of the smartest money in the world, loved by the press until the moment it wasn't, gone in 18 months. The Valley has produced larger disasters. It has never produced a cleaner one. If you want to know how WeWork raised $47 billion on a real estate company dressed as a tech startup, and how one photograph in a pitch deck became the symbol of an entire era's delusion, that story is next. Subscribe for more hidden empires.